Everybody. You're very welcome to our webinar this morning, and thank you very much for joining us. If you've navigated any technical issues that I believe people are having out there with the weather that's upon us, we're delighted to have you here for what is our final webinar in the Unlocking Knowledge Transfer series, our final webinar for 2021. And this morning we'll be taking a look back at the knowledge transfer system for the year past. We'll be looking at how the system has performed, talking a little bit around some of the key developments that punctuated the year, some of the highlights, some of the successes, and some of the challenges that people have navigated during the last 12 months. And to chat through those topics, we are very pleased to be joined by a marvelous panel. We have Jennifer Brennan, who is the Director of Research, Development and Innovation at the Technological Higher Education Association, TIA. We have Alison Campbell, our Director in Knowledge Transfer Ireland, Imelda Lampkin, who is the Manager of the Disruptive Technologies Innovation Fund at Enterprise Ireland, and Kevin Walsh, who is Head of Research Centres at Science Foundation Ireland. So without further ado, I'm going to hand you over to that discussion, to our panelists, who will be moderated by our guest moderator this morning, Ian Guider, who many of you will know from his role as markets editor in the Sunday Business Post. Please do feel free to ask questions as we progress using the questions function, which you'll find at the bottom of your screen. And I'm hoping that we'll have a very lively and interactive discussion this morning. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth. And it's great to see so many of you have logged on this morning, especially given the weather outside and across parts of the country where it is going to be a very difficult day. So thank you for giving over your time this morning. As Elizabeth said, we have a great panel as experts, as many of you who have logged on to these webinars in the past will know. So they are the experts. And as Elizabeth said, your questions are very important and we'll try to answer them as many as possible throughout the next 45 minutes or so. So let's jump straight into it, and there's no better person to start with Alison, because I think it's been a very busy year, in fact a very busy 2 years over the knowledge transfer system, and you've been looking at and collating some of the numbers of engagements with industry. Tell us about the increase over the last year or so, but also drill down into some of those numbers and give us the details of what you're seeing between industry and researchers out there.
Oh, thanks very much, Ian. And I think sort of first of all, just to say that it's actually been a surprisingly buoyant couple of years, and I think when we looked back, 18 months ago and stood there, we, of course, none of us were sure that what was going to happen, but particularly when we were looking at that whole research engagement and businesses working with researchers and people in the third level, we thought, how is this going to go? And what's been really interesting was last year we found this, and we found this internationally as well when we talked to colleagues. There was still an appetite for companies to engage with researchers and the research base more generally. And we've actually seen that playing out in 2021 too. I think to a certain extent that's because we really do have, what we're calling this innovation imperative. We've seen how quickly you can innovate. We've seen how very important rapid and agile innovation is. And I think we're as conscious now, if not more so than before, that all of the resources and the expertise we need just doesn't sit in one place. And that's actually whether you're a company or otherwise. So what we've definitely been seeing over this past year is that continuing interaction and interest from companies of working with the third level. And very interesting, with some very recent data we've got on consultancy activity with the university system, is that companies, and indeed a lot of other organizations as well, are really looking to the research community to help them think around new and innovative ways of doing things. So it's not just the next drug, it's not just the next big product, it's about services innovation as well.
I might just put that same question to Kevin Walsh, Head of Research Centres at Science Foundation Ireland. Have you seen that level of engagement increase over the course of 2021?
I suppose the straight answer is we have, but I suppose it would be remiss of me not to just, I suppose, initially talk about the challenges of 2021. I suppose we're even today, we're sort of brought back to how we started the year, under extremely challenging circumstances, kids at home from school, everyone in quite a hard lockdown. So I suppose it has been a challenging year, but despite significant challenges, I suppose, with the SFI Research Centre specifically, we've seen, I suppose, the strongest year to date in terms of business development. So we've seen our centres have gone out and they've signed over 135 collaborative research agreements with industry partners, securing slightly over 35 million euros in commitments from industry partners in terms of performing collaborative research going forward. So yes, we have seen quite a buoyant year, despite the challenges. So I suppose that sort of speaks to just the perseverance of the academic community in terms of pursuing collaborative research engagement with their industry partners.
I suppose the same question to Imelda. You would have been as busy as Alison and Kevin over the past year. You might just also take us through how the impact of COVID has had an impact on some of the work you've been doing over the past 12 months.
Sure. Thanks a million, Ian, and good morning all. I would echo both Kevin and Alison's comments in that we're amazed at what I would say was a buoyant year. And to give you an idea of that, for example, under the Disruptive Technologies Innovation Fund, we ran a call last year. We awarded 29 projects, 95 million euros of funding. And that was an increase on the year before, which for us was very surprising. We didn't know what to expect given the circumstances we were working in. To give you a feeling for what they are, they ranged from everything from space with Earth observation, right down to the deep sea, to anchoring on the seabed, for example, where we have very interesting mining companies looking at activity at that level. So everything from space to deep sea and a whole lot of things in between. And actually a lot of what we have funded is in the life sciences, med tech, ICT areas. And so they're very interesting projects. So I suppose that was one part of it, very strong. Another part is that we've just launched the next call. And again, for us, it's a very big step each time we move on to our next call. And so actually a little plug from me for today. We have our information webinar for potential applicants to that call tomorrow afternoon. So for anybody who's interested, now's your chance. We can give you the registration link on our Twitter account at Disruptive EI. But in terms of COVID challenges specifically, yes, there were challenges. We were surprised by a lot of our project teams, very much saying to us that, yes, there had been very big impacts, but they were able to adapt. So they were able to do, some of the paperwork, the investigating the markets, for example, sitting at home while the labs were closed. And then they were able to get back in and get the work going. So we're, again, quite surprised at the level of activity that was maintained. Now, we do see some that our project teams will look for more time. So I suppose that would be one aspect, but a sort of a negative point I would make for us, we haven't been out on site at our project sites, within our companies and within our academic organizations. And that's something that we typically do. We're typically on site, we're attending consortium meetings, we're up to date in person with our teams, and we haven't been able to do that, but we've continued it virtually.
And I'll come back to that in a few moments with the rest of the other panelists about how to work within an environment where you cannot get out and meet people as closely as you would have in the past. But I do want to bring in just our final panelist this morning, Jennifer, and you can speak to the difficulties many researchers may have had over the past 12 months, but also some of the exciting things that have happened, because of course, in the last few months, we've had new technological universities across the country, and we're going to get more still. So from the positives and negatives of the year, take us through your highlights and perhaps some of the difficulties you've encountered and overcome.
Thanks, Ian. Yeah, so I think when the pandemic first hit, we did have a real concern that there was going to be a huge negative impact on the really important work that the Institutes of Technology and Technological Universities do to support particularly small companies in the regions around where the institutions are located. We were really concerned that, sort of cutting down on access to laboratory facilities, etc., would actually be a real barrier. But it hasn't really panned out like that, because the government were quite prescient, and early enough on in the pandemic, they decided that research was an essential service, which meant that we were able to get back on site again. We've tried to use the remote sort of mechanism of engaging with people, and that has worked really well. As Imelda said, it's much better when you can get on site and you can actually talk to people, but we can reach out, particularly, for example, to companies that mightn't be all that close to our campuses. We can now actually have a Zoom call with them, we can have a Teams call, and we can make those links really quite easily. And then hopefully we'll be able to get back on the road soon and start to reach out to people. One of the things that was really positive is that where projects were struggling and needed more time or needed more money, the state actually made that available. So there was a fund made available through the Higher Education Authority. And also Enterprise Ireland put some additional funding of their own into that to keep some of the projects up and running. And I think we've seen some really interesting things happen this year. I had a quick scan to see what kind of projects we've been doing, and we do a real mix of scale of projects. So everything from a €5,000 innovation voucher up to maybe even a €500,000, collaborative innovation partnership project. And there's been some really nice things that have happened over this year and projects that have reported. And some of the ones that caught my eye was there was the Southeastern Applied Materials Research Centre in Waterford IT did a really great project with a company called, I have to get this right now, Monkey Reusable Products Limited, who were looking to improve the manufacturing of the lids on their reusable coffee cups. And as a result of the work that was done, that company actually decided to move their manufacturing from China back to Ireland, and those products are now being made in Waterford. So that's a really nice success story. And there was some other really good work that was done in the Northwest. The Medical and Engineering Technologies Gateway in GMIT did a really nice project where they helped a company called Ocean Harvest Limited to evaluate seaweed blends for use in aquaculture. So we're seeing, as Imelda said, a really, really broad range of all kinds of projects. And, some of them large, some of them small, but all really beneficial to the industry partners that get involved with our institutions.
That's a great name for a company, Jennifer. Can I put it to some of the panel there? And I think maybe Alison, Kevin and Imelda, whoever wants to take this. I get the sense that you're surprised by the level of engagement by Irish companies over the past year, that there does seem to be, despite all the challenges that would have been happening through lockdown, that companies are still looking to innovate, people are still looking to collaborate with universities and ITs out there. And that, given that, it puts people in a position for 2022 and beyond looking fairly positive. So from what could have been a very difficult year or perhaps a very bleak year, companies are adapting to change and are looking to the future.
Absolutely, Ian. And I mean, I think that I think probably comes back to my earlier point, is that, it's really, we're not in a very static environment. Innovation is really important. And if we look at, some of the significant changes that companies are going to have to adopt to, both internally, but particularly within markets, the whole sort of digital transformation side of things, the whole green and sustainability. I mean, there are areas that not only are they going to have to move a pace in, but we're also seeing that the supports that wrap around that to encourage that to happen. So, Enterprise Ireland's new strategy and its focus will be heavily within those areas, and that really echoes very much what we're seeing coming through from Europe, the European Commission, the kind of funding that's available. So there's a very nice, I think, cycle in all of this. Companies are understanding the markets that they need to be in and that they need to innovate, but they're getting a lot of clues externally, particularly from the funders and those who would support them, and then they've got the confidence to be able able to move forward and do that. And one of the things that always delights me is when we sort of see those kinds of serial engagers with companies. We had the KTI awards just a couple of weeks ago, and we had a very nice session with NBio, who'd worked with UCD, and they've probably worked with, I don't know, another 5 or 6, if not more, colleges, subsequently to access different expertise or different kinds of technologies. And I think that's the kind of thing that we want. And similarly, we've seen some of that, with larger companies as well, like Intel, who've worked with Tyndall. They work with DCU. They're involved in the Connect Center at Trinity. And I think that's the kind of thing. It's small companies, it's large companies, but they're coming back for more and seeing the value in it. And I think that's really encouraging. And I think for us, that means that's quite an encouragement for other companies to get involved as well.
Kevin, I might bring you in on that point. Are you seeing people you would have worked with in the past coming back, looking to have further discussions? You mentioned 135 collaboration agreements signed. Can you take us through maybe just a little bit of those details? Are they new people that you're working with? Are there people, as Alison said, that they are serial innovators out there and they're coming back looking for further engagement?
Yeah, so we with the SFI research centers, we very much sort of see repeat engagement from the same industry partners that are very happy with the outcome of a previous collaborative research project, and then there's continued sort of business, so to speak. I suppose one of the highlights early this year was that we launched the second phase of funding for 5 of our research centers. We call them the 2013 research centers, and that's the second term of funding for our centers. The funding model changes, so they're mandated to increase their engagement with industry. And I suppose the strategy that a lot of our centers take in that regard is they develop what they call strategic research partnerships. So Alison would have referred to Intel and Tyndall, more specifically IPIC, which is our photonics research center. So it's sort of they develop longer term partnerships with specific industry partners, so that they can sort of engage in a sort of deeper dives over a longer period of time. So yeah, we very much see that.
I perhaps want to bring the conversation back to something Imelda said there as well, which was, obviously we are working in a remote environment. We would all love to be sitting in the same room having this conversation on a stage with an audience in front of us. But how has COVID had a practical impact, or has it had a practical impact? Imelda said it's hard to get out there and meet clients. Has it slowed the process down of signing agreements, meeting individuals out there, getting researchers into the same room as each other? Jennifer touched on it as well, that you did have, look, research has been designated essential now, but has it slowed down generally the flow of applications, the process, some of the engagements from the time people first have their conversations to actually signing an agreement? And I'll open that to all of you out there, but I think Imelda touched on it, so maybe some of the other panelists might come in on that.
Yeah, I might just jump in on that, Ian. So one of the things that I also do is I sit on one of the Enterprise Ireland committees that approves some of the research and innovation funding that goes out into the system, a lot of it for collaborative research between industry and academia. And to be honest with you, we don't really see a slowdown. We haven't. Now, perhaps, and I personally have to say, I don't have the experience on the ground to be able to say this, perhaps there is a slowdown in the preparation of applications, but we don't see a slowdown in the pipeline. And it's something that has really been on our radar since the start of the pandemic. And we always ask the question at the end of our monthly meetings, what does the pipeline look like for next month? And it always looks pretty healthy, apart from the usual fluctuations where it quiets down over the summer, for example. So we don't really see it. I think we see a real desire. And to pick up on something that Alison said, I think companies are really starting to realize that there's a wealth of expertise in our higher education institutions that they can tap into. And there's also a wealth of programs of all different sort of sizes and scale to meet the needs of different companies of different sizes and scale. So that they're all out there. And I think there's a realization now, and companies are really starting to tap into that.
Yeah, I'll throw that. Actually, just picking up on that point, I'll stick with this for a moment. Has industry realized the scale of supports and also resources available to them? I'll throw that out to any of you who want to answer it.
Maybe I'll take that one, Ian. I would say with the Disruptive Technologies Innovation Fund, they're avid users of the fund now. And I think there's a real recognition, particularly for the small high-tech companies, that this is a huge opportunity available to them in Ireland. And I think that COVID effect, it's probably been a time when many people haven't been on the road. And so, you know, less travel nationally and internationally, more time to focus on building their consortium and actually doing the paperwork for their grant applications. So, you know, we were looking at it thinking, this is great. People are at home and they've time to write these grant applications, which can be a little bit long and difficult and take time to get a collaborative plan on paper. But yet the companies have been doing this and really chasing this funding, I would say. So for us, it's a really interesting development to see the level of demand out there. And of course, we're looking for more. We'd love to make use of the opportunities that are there while they're there.
And I'll get on to the next round of the Disruptive Fund in a few moments' time. But to bring it back to Alison, again, the resources available, I think we're at a record level. So are you expecting that level of interest to continue over the next few months?
I would hope so, but I'm often, you know, it's that usual mantra, isn't it? You know, past performance is no indicator of future performance, and I think we just have to be cautious. I think for a couple of reasons. I mean, one of them is to remember that all of these engagements are predicated on good, deep, long-term funding for research and researchers within the system. So first and foremost, we need that to continue. And all of these overnight successes that we're seeing are actually based on a very long period of time, both in terms of the development of relationships, but actually the development of the system to support them. So we need to just sort of temper our expectations a little there. And I think also we just need to be mindful of the fact that we have a research base that needs to make sure that it's still winning grant funding, whether that be from Europe, whether that be nationally, and it's got to continue to pump out those you know, high quality research publications, basically in order to stay in the game. So the system needs to be balanced in the right kind of a way to make sure that longer term we're still as vibrant as we are at the moment. But you know, I have to say, all of that said, I am actually really encouraged, and there's a couple of things that really do float my boat, as it were. And one of them is just around our whole knowledge transfer system in Ireland. And when you sit here, you tend not to notice it. You know, we can all notice the warts and the wrinkles and what have you, but when you step outside, I've been doing quite a lot of work in Europe with the European Commission in various expert groups. And you actually, when you hear the amount of respect there is for the Irish system of knowledge transfer and industry engagement, both in terms of the financial and funding supports that are available, but also the skilled people that we've got on the ground to help companies engage. You know, it really is quite heartwarming. I think we got there in terms of a maturity of a system and something that's particularly well recognized. And the other thing I'd say in that really I'm really encouraged by is that the Board of Enterprise Ireland, you know, has recognised the value of the innovation offices, the technology transfer offices that are out there. We did a whole bunch of reviews and surveys at the earlier part of this year, really talking to a very broad stakeholder and engager community. And the message that was coming back to my point about what our friends abroad see of us is that companies saw a real value in the innovation system and the innovation offices and how they supported them and really valued the connections that they had. And Enterprise Ireland has committed to another round of funding to support those innovation offices, a very new program called the KT Boost program that's going to be available from 2013 to make sure that we still have people on the ground in universities and within the technological universities who can really help both companies, founders and entrepreneurs really engage with the system. So I think despite my slight, oh, we have to caveat all of this. I think it really is all looking quite positive.
Before I move on to some more topics, just a reminder to people out there, we have had a few questions that have come in already, and we'll get to them in just a couple of moments. But if you'd like to get your questions in, you can see the Q&A function there at the bottom of your screen on Zoom there. And we really would like your input because, of course, it gives the panelists a chance to know what you're thinking and also gives them some insight as to what's going on the ground. Can I actually ask, and I'm open to any of the panelists for this, can you tell me, are we seeing a good spread of engagement between companies in the regions and the universities and the ITs, or is a lot of it Dublin-centric? We hear all of the great success stories of the high potential startups in Dublin, but are we seeing some really innovative things on the ground? Jennifer mentioned a couple of organizations out there as well that are happening around the country. I think it's important that we don't just have a Dublin-centric model.
Yeah, I'm happy to take that, Ian.
Yeah.
So a number of our centres are actually hosted in Limerick, Cork, Galway, and I suppose there's some really strong examples. So if you take Curram, for example, it's our medical devices research centre. It's hosted out of NUIG, and obviously most people would be aware that Galway is very much a hotbed of medical devices companies, and Curram would engage, have a lot of collaborations with companies in the area, and similar to that we have Confirm, which is our smart manufacturing research centre, and that's hosted out of UL in Limerick, and it's very much Confirm is very much becoming a sort of a key element of a sort of smart manufacturing ecosystem that is based around Limerick. And I suppose there's a number of really nice examples of large multinational companies that have started to sort of actively collaborate through the connections that they've made through Confirm. So there's lots more sort of non-Dublin related examples of knowledge transfer.
Same thing to you, Imelda. You obviously mentioned earlier on all of the sectors that you're seeing interest from. Is there a good regional spread and balance of where that interest is coming from, and also for who is winning the funding?
Absolutely, Ian. We'd be similar in that we have a lot of our projects which involve academic researchers with the companies. And so they're scattered throughout Ireland, you know, with a nucleus of activity here and there. Just for example, like Kevin mentioning the medical devices area in Galway, a lot of our smaller companies are sitting in incubators within the higher education institutions, for example, or they're associated with them. And so they're scattered all over the country, right through to one example I'd give you where one of our projects is focused on community energy. And so we saw them carrying out one of their, what you might call definitely a regional study recently on the Aran Islands. And so you can't get more all-inclusive, I think, when we're reaching out to the islands as well as the rest of the country.
Jennifer, you might just come back in on that. As I said, you kicked that off mentioning some of the great things you've seen. Looking at the future for the technical universities, are you seeing some good projects coming in on the ground?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a really interesting time actually for the higher education sector and the knowledge transfer system, because, you know, by the middle of next year, we're no longer going to have sort of a big bunch of institutes of technology. We're going to actually have 5 technological universities, which will very much have a big regional spread. Like if we think about the new, it's just the name has been just announced, the Atlantic Technological University, it's going to cover an area from sort of Galway right the way through to Donegal. And so it has a real sort of regional focus that happens there. And as Imelda said, like all of those areas and all those institutes that will make up those new technological universities, they all have incubation and innovation centres on campus. And that's really where the industry engagement is driven out of. And I suppose one of the things that is a difference between sort of the old IoTs and these new technological universities is actually the amount of research and innovation that they're expected to deliver. So it's forecasted to grow quite a lot. And so what that means is that in the areas where maybe research and innovation was slightly smaller, where there was an institute of technology there, when you get a technological university within 5 to 10 years time, you're going to see a really big increase in the research activity. And then that has a knock-on effect on the amount of, I suppose, research base that is there, if it's adequately funded, as Alison alluded to, that companies can kind of draw from. And I think the other thing that is of a real advantage for the technological universities is their strong track record in actually helping new companies to start up. So they're all involved in something called the New Frontiers National Entrepreneurship Development Programme, which Enterprise Ireland sponsors. So they have a real strength in helping people to start companies in the region. And if you combine that then with a real increase in research performance, so that somebody within an institution, for example, could come up with a really great research idea that could be a spin out, you know, on campus, they have somebody to go to who can help them to actually start up that company. And we see that mirrored across the whole higher education sector. But I suppose to come back to your initial question, it's a real regional value because it's outside of the major cities for most of these new technological universities.
Well, we've got some questions coming in now. We've got a couple of specific ones there. I think Imelda, there's a specific one for you we'll get to in a moment. We also have a general question here. This is from Siobhan, and the question is, what standards have contributed the most to helping businesses and encourage collaboration? I know that's a very wide area, but if anybody would like to take it on the panel, I suppose it's giving general tips to people out there as to how they can get together and engage.
Well, I think in terms of standards to encourage collaboration, I think there's many different ways to tackle the answer to that. On the one hand, I think that what we're seeing through various networks and events, and I'm obviously, you know, opportunities like the KTI webinars are great because we have a deep dive into certain areas, and we're actually planning some sort of series of masterclasses next year as well, which will be really helpful to get into the nitty-gritty of things for companies. But through those and through other events such as those run by IRDG, there's a really good opportunity for companies to come together virtually, but to really understand and think about what others are doing, how they're doing it, and getting that sense of the best approaches that are brought to bear. I'd also say that in terms of standardization, the funders have been great and really helpful. And to a certain extent, there's that whole element of question you were asking earlier, you know, what's the contract turnaround time? You know, how do we make it easier? I think that we found very much in the virtual world that where possible, we're seeing a lot of the colleges actually turning a lot of their contracting processes, if it's easy to do so, into more a digital version. You know, here's an agreement, if you like it, sign it, move on. Let's just crack on with it. We're looking certainly at things like DocuSign and all the rest of it. So speeding up processes. And I would say, as I was saying, with the funders, you know, the DTIF program, for example, it has very much a standard template that people are using for research collaboration that sets out really clearly, I mean, not only all of the detail that you need to have in a consortium agreement, but also elements that companies can use in terms of this is what we need to think about. So we need to have governance that looks like this. We need to have this kind of committee for doing this. We need to have program management that might look like that. So there's lots there to, I think, help companies understand how they need to get involved and what they might need to do. And of course, they can come to the KTI website where we've got a hoard of practical guides and template agreements that companies can use to really get them going on the first foot to speed things up, but importantly, to see what good looks like and what standard and normal looks like. So it's not only have no fear in all of this, but it's also around we can actually get moving quicker because we've got more confidence about things, what things look like. And what we are finding is that a lot of the smaller companies in particular are saying how welcome they find those kinds of resources.
Let's get to some more of the questions out there, and you can keep them coming in. You'll see the chat function or the Q&A function on your screen there. This is for Imelda, coming in from Graham. Some early DTIF projects have had a good outcome, but require more funding to get it further along the TRL towards commercialization. Is there any DTIF type follow-on funding planned, or is it limited to EI Innovation Partnership or EI Company R&D funding support? There's a very detailed question for you, Imelda. We're going to have to put that one straight to you.
No problem. There isn't any follow-on funding or follow-on support currently under DTIF. And it's something that, of course, we're looking at. And to give you an example, we have a project portfolio that we're currently managing of 235 million euros. And I suppose initially we were so busy getting set up, you know, we needed to run competitive calls, we needed to get people to contract and get the projects up and running, that actually that was our focus. Whereas now it's portfolio focused. It's what can we do with this set of projects, and particularly with their next steps. So yes, I would say we're considering it, but no, we have no current offer right now. One thing I would comment on is the fact that our new call is open. So for people who have an industrial research element of their project that's ongoing, they may look at that call. And coming back to the point earlier around serial users of the supports that are available, we're seeing that more and more, where now that people know about DTIF, they know how to use it and what they can use it for. But in terms of a next step support around the commercialization activity, I would say watch this space. We're looking for opportunities to help.
Keep your questions coming in. As I said, we'll get to them in a moment, but just a couple of more of some of the topics I wanted to cover. Jennifer, you and I spoke recently, and we were talking about the opportunities for cross-border collaboration, particularly for the technological universities. You might just maybe take us through some of the things you're seeing coming down the line.
Yeah, thanks, Ian. I think the cross-border cooperation actually it's a really big area for Ireland, and we can see that with the sort of plans that have been put in place through the Shared Island Initiative. I think there are some really nice opportunities for companies through the Peace Plus program. So some companies may be familiar, particularly if they're in the border area, with the old Interreg program, which allowed them to put together sort of collaborative research ideas with academia in those areas. And we would have seen the institutes like Dundalk Institute of Technology have a fantastic project on chronic obstructive pulmonary disease with universities in Northern Ireland and also in the very west part of Scotland through those programs. And that's now sort of been merged into something called the Peace Plus program, which is really designed to help that sort of strategic research and also innovation cooperation and also societal cooperation across the island as well. So there's really great opportunities there. And there's also the Horizon Europe program, which is the big EU funding stream as well. And so there are good opportunities to get involved. And I would say in general, like go back to the standards thing, there's lots of great guidelines and help out there. The KTI website is fantastic. The KTI staff are extremely knowledgeable, but there's also a bunch of people on the ground in the institutions who can really help you to guide you through these processes. So I would say, you know, if you're a company out there and you're thinking about getting involved, you know, maybe your first port of call should be to go down to the local innovation centre in your local institution and just knock on the door or, you know, make a phone call. There's always somebody there able to talk, drop them an email and arrange for an appointment either virtually or in person if that's possible. And just to chat through all your different options. These people are really knowledgeable and they can really help. And even places like the local enterprise offices would be extremely knowledgeable about the different services available in your local higher education institution. And obviously, if you're an Enterprise Ireland or UDROS client, you know, talk to your development advisor and they can point you in the right direction too.
Let's go back to some of your questions out there, and I'll throw this open to anyone, either Kevin or Imelda or Alison wants to take this. Is it becoming harder and harder to get funding, especially in the medical device life sciences project? We need to see more proof of concept funds in order to convince funders that projects are worth investing in. Any such funding coming up? Who wants to take that question? I know Imelda and maybe Kevin as well, you might have an interest in that.
Maybe I'll comment from the DTIF side, but I think probably then also appropriate to Kevin, as you say. With DTIF, we have many medical device and life sciences projects. Many of them are bringing their initial concepts through to a first in human study. And it's a huge step that can be very conducive to attracting investors. So we see it as a very useful addition to the national environment, particularly of funding. But I would say that one key point is that it's at a very large scale. We have a minimum funding request of €1.5 million. So for companies, for academic researchers who have got to that scale, it's a huge opportunity. But is there a gap prior to that for much smaller initial proof of concepts? And I think that's where Kevin can come in.
Yeah, Kevin, we'll bring you in on that point.
Sure. So SFI traditionally, we take a bottom-up approach. So we run a lot of programs to support researchers at various different stages of their career. And normally, ordinarily, they're sort of bottom up, so they're not specific. So they're very much open to people in the life science and the medtech space. I suppose I mentioned Curum earlier. That is actually one of our largest research centres, and I mentioned it's hosted at Curum. And all of our centres, there's mechanisms whereby they can bring new people on board, where new people can join and get involved in research centres. So there's a lot of opportunities out there for people that have really good, excellent research ideas and want to get involved. And I suppose finally, just to mention, we relaunched this year our industry R&D fellowship program, which was very sort of heavily subscribed in 2021, and that provides opportunities for academic researchers to actually go on site to an industry partner and to engage in a collaborative research project on site with the industry partners. So that's another opportunity that's open as well. So there's lots out there.
We have a bit more time for some questions, so do get them in. But I think I might start looking ahead to 2022, which we all hope will be much better than certainly the early part of 2021. Can I start by maybe to you, Alison? What are your priorities, and also what will be the 2-3 things that you will be focusing on next year in KCI?
Oh, thanks. I mean, I think next year a top priority for us is something I mentioned earlier. We'll be rolling out, evaluating, and taking an international panel in to help us do that. A call for proposals from the universities and the technological universities to look at funding for innovation offices to particularly drive research commercialization, the creation of new companies, licensing, and collaboration. So that's going to be one major area of focus for us. Another one is around just making sure that we are celebrating some of the good stuff that's coming out of the system. So those who are used to hearing and reading our system performance annual KT survey can be reassured there'll be another one of those coming out along with our awards. And I mentioned earlier, we are looking at building out this webinar series. So we're definitely having a whole set of monthly webinars again next year. And we've already got quite a lively program planned. And we're going to supplement that with a series of videos, which are happening in spring and autumn, that are really looking at masterclass and an opportunity to have a much deeper dive into some of those areas that our engagers, our audience, say that they're really interested in knowing more about. And one of them will be around the whole sort of area of research agreements. And we're updating in line with that. We're updating our template model agreements so that they're even more user-friendly to use.
I know, Mel, the big focus for you will be on the 4th call of the DTIF.
That's exactly right. Yeah, the call is open with a closing date in February. We're hoping that people out there are already interacting with their potential partners or their consortium if they have formed quite a mature relationship. So for us, that's absolutely a priority. I mentioned the management of this very large project portfolio that we have is key for us. It's how do we make it really work for everybody who's involved in DTIF? What do we do next? And then just one heads up for people is that we believe that we will move into a series of theme-specific calls under DTIF. And I think they'll be quite exciting. They'll be targeting very specific.
Give us a hint. Give us a hint.
I think everybody can see that we're very interested in things like sustainability, advanced manufacturing, areas like that, which, you know, are a real priority for government. So all I can say for now is watch this space, but something should come through soon.
We'll hold you to get the details soon enough. Kevin, what's going to be top of your agenda in 2022? What will you be spending a lot of your time working on?
So I suppose just looking back on this year, I suppose one of the real positives is there's been a huge increase in the sort of collaboration between us, so, you know, SFI, Enterprise Ireland, KTI, the IDA, and all of the different sort of actors in the knowledge transfer ecosystem. I suppose that's all been enabled by the sort of virtual working environment. And I suppose together we've been kind of looking at the entire ecosystem and the various different supports that exist for industry across the TRL scale, so all the way from TRL 1 right up to 9, and where each piece of the puzzle, so to speak, provides support. So as going forward in 2022, we're very much looking at the future of the National Research Centres ecosystem, and more specifically within SFI, we're developing a phase 3 model for our SFI Research Centres program, which will, support research centres from beyond 2025. So that's going to be a key focus next year.
And finally, from our panel, Jennifer, what will be occupying your in-tray mostly next year? Quite a lot, I'd imagine.
Yeah, quite a lot. Look, I think for me, the big thing really is technological universities. By the middle of next year, we'll have the last of the tranche being established, of the current tranche being established. So I think for me, my focus really will be on making sure that they get the additional resources that they need in order to sort of live up to the expectations around research and innovation. And I suppose I'm delighted to hear about the KT Boost program, and we're really looking forward to supporting our institutions in that. For the institutions on the ground, they obviously have to merge. So their institutions are coming together to create these new entities, and that is a big job. But it does also provide a real opportunity for them to kind of optimize their supports and internal structures for research and innovation, and particularly around knowledge transfer, to make sure that when they bring their institutions together, that they're kind of getting the best of the institutions and they're putting that to the fore. So that's going to be a lot of hard work for them. I don't envy them that job, but we'll be here to try to support them as much as possible.
And I would imagine all of the panelists will be paying a lot of attention in 2022 when we get a new research and innovation strategy, which lots of people I know you've been working on, and this will be something that will be very important to yourselves, but also industry out there as well in 2022 and beyond. So thank you very much to all our panelists, and thank you very much to you for getting your questions in, and also for attending as well today, given the difficulties with the weather disruption out there. So I'll hand back to Elizabeth. Oh, I don't think we have Elizabeth, do we? No, do we have Elizabeth there?
Sorry, she's just come
back. I did have some technical difficulties there.
The theme of 2021 and 2020, we have somebody either on mute or a little bit difficult. Elizabeth, I just want to say we had a great panel this morning and some great discussions there and some very good questions in. So we'll hand it back to you to wrap up the event and to wrap up 2021.
Thank you. And I did hear the full discussion, and it was a terrific discussion. So Ian, couldn't agree more. I really just want to say thank you to all of our panelists for bringing such a great and lively discussion to life this morning. And thank you, Ian, for charging through so many questions and really getting to explore some of the key topics from the year. As Alison mentioned, we will be continuing on our webinar series throughout the year next year. And I'd like to thank everyone for joining us this morning, and we hope that we'll see you at our next webinar, which will be taking place in January. It's not the first Tuesday, but the second Tuesday in January, and we'll be looking at the theme of patenting. So that's a date for your diary at this point, but I think all that's really left for me to say on behalf of KTI and everybody here is thank you very much, and we wish you all a very lovely and a very happy Christmas.